The house he thought was safe for his daughter was filled with secrets, cruelty, and lies, and the woman he trusted most was hiding a darkness far deeper than anyone imagined. When the truth begins to surface, love and betrayal collide in a battle for this child's future. What would you do if the person you trusted with your child turned out to be the one destroying her? The grandfather clock in the hallway echoed through the empty house, its steady ticking mixing with the soft patter of rain against the windows. Lily sat at the massive dining table, her small frame almost lost in the oversized chair. The polished mahogany surface stretched out before her, making her feel even tinier than her 8 years. Her stomach growled loudly, and she pressed her hands against it, trying to quiet the sound. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and even that had been just a piece of dry toast that Veronica had allowed her to have. The click of heels against hardwood made Lily's shoulders tense. Veronica appeared, her perfectly manicured hands holding a chipped bowl and a plate. The sound of the dishes being set down made Lily's heart sink. The bread was spotted with green and blue patches of mold, and the soup looked like dirty dishwater, with a few soggy vegetables floating on top. Lily's lower lip trembled as she looked up at her stepmother. "Please don't make me eat this," she whispered, tears welling in her big brown eyes. Veronica's red lips curved into a cruel smile. "Oh, look who's being picky again." She leaned down, her designer perfume overwhelming Lily's senses. "You ungrateful little brat. Do you know how many children would be thankful for any food at all?" Lily's hands shook in her lap. "But it's moldy," she said, her voice barely audible. "And that's exactly what you deserve." Veronica's voice took on a sing-song quality that made Lily's skin crawl. "Your father spoils you too much. Someone needs to teach you about real life." A tear rolled down Lily's cheek as she stared at the disgusting food. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but the sight of the moldy bread made her want to be sick. The soup's strange smell reached her nose, making her eyes water even more. "Eat it," Veronica commanded, standing over her with crossed arms. "Now!" Lily picked up the bread with trembling fingers. It felt slimy against her skin, and she had to fight back a gag. Another tear fell, followed by another. "Stop that crying!" Veronica snapped, her perfect facade cracking to reveal the anger underneath. "You're such a drama queen. Just like your mother was, I bet." She grabbed Lily's shoulder, her fingers digging in painfully. "Eat it now." The bread inched closer to Lily's mouth as more tears streamed down her face. The moldy smell made her dizzy, but Veronica's grip tightened, forcing her hand upward. Lily closed her eyes, unable to look at what she was about to put in her mouth. The sound of the front door opening made them both freeze. "Lily?" David's familiar voice called out. "Anyone home?" Lily's eyes flew open as her father appeared in the dining room doorway, still holding his briefcase. His usual confident smile vanished as he took in the scene before him, his daughter with tears streaming down her face, moldy bread inches from her mouth, and his wife's hand gripping their child's shoulder. The bread trembled in Lily's hand as she looked at her father, hope and fear battling in her expression. For a moment, the only sounds were the continuing rain and the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock. David's face drained of color as his eyes moved from Lily's tear-stained face to the moldy bread in her hand, then to the watery soup on the table. His briefcase hit the floor with a dull thud. "What?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is going on here?" Veronica's hand instantly released Lily's shoulder, and her entire demeanor transformed. "Oh, David, you're home early." She moved away from Lily, all elegance and charm once again. "We were just having a little lesson about being grateful for what we have. You know how dramatic Lily can be about her food." But David wasn't looking at his wife. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, who sat frozen in her chair. the moldy bread still held in her small, shaking hand. Rain continued to drum against the windows, filling the heavy silence that had fallen over the room. The clock struck the hour, its deep chimes echoing through the tense atmosphere. Lily jumped at the sound, accidentally dropping the bread onto the polished table. It landed with a soft plop, leaving a damp mark on the wood. David still hadn't moved from the doorway. His face had gone from pale to flushed, and his hands were clenched into tight fists at his sides. When he finally spoke again, his voice was thick with barely controlled emotion. "Lily," he said softly, "put that bread down, sweetheart." Lily immediately dropped the moldy slice, as if it had burned her. She wiped her hand frantically on her dress, trying to get rid of the slimy feeling on her fingers. "David, darling," Veronica started, taking a step toward him with her arms outstretched. "You're making far too much of this. I was simply—" "Don't." The single word cut through the air like a knife. David's eyes finally moved to his wife's face, and there was something in them that made her step backward. "Don't say another word." David's briefcase lay forgotten on the floor as he crossed the dining room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside Lily's chair, his hands gentle as they cupped her tear-stained face. Up close, he could see how pale she looked, how her small shoulders trembled beneath her blue dress. "Sweetheart," he said softly, thumbing away a tear from her cheek, "when was the last time you ate?" Before Lily could answer, Veronica's laugh tinkled through the air like breaking glass. "Oh, David. Really? She had toast this morning. She's just being difficult about her lunch, that's all. You know how children can be." David didn't take his eyes off his daughter. "Lily!" She opened her mouth to speak, but her gaze darted to Veronica, and she quickly looked down at her lap instead. Her fingers twisted nervously in the fabric of her dress. "See?" Veronica moved closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "She's just trying to get attention. I've been nothing but patient with her, David, but honestly, the dramatics are becoming a bit much." David stood slowly, his body tense, as he turned to face his wife. "Patient?" He gestured at the moldy bread and watery soup. "You call this patience, Veronica?" "Now, darling." Veronica's perfectly painted lips curved into a concerned smile. "I know this looks bad, but I was simply teaching her an important lesson about appreciation. You've always said we shouldn't spoil her." "By feeding her mold?" David's voice rose sharply. "Of course not." Veronica pressed a hand to her chest, the picture of wounded innocence. "I would never actually make her eat it. It was just to make a point. She's been so picky lately, refusing perfectly good meals, throwing little tantrums." She sighed dramatically. "I thought a small demonstration might help her understand how fortunate she is." David looked back at Lily, who seemed to be trying to make herself as small as possible in the large dining chair. "Is that true, sweetheart? Have you been refusing to eat?" Lily's lower lip trembled. She glanced at Veronica again, then quickly shook her head, but remained silent. "She's simply embarrassed now that you're here," Veronica said smoothly. "Children can be so manipulative sometimes, can't they? One parent says no, so they run to the other." She reached out to touch David's arm. "I know you're tired from your trip, darling. Why don't you go freshen up while I fix Lily a proper lunch?" David shrugged off her touch. "I think I'll stay right here." "Really, David? You're overreacting." Veronica's voice took on an edge of impatience. "I've been managing just fine while you were away. We've had a few little adjustment periods, that's all. It's perfectly normal with blended families." "Normal?" David picked up the moldy bread, his face darkening. "This isn't normal, Veronica. This isn't anything close to normal." "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Veronica threw up her hands. "Fine. I admit it wasn't my best parenting moment, but I've been trying so hard with her, David. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to deal with a child who constantly tests you?" Throughout their exchange, Lily hadn't moved or spoken. She sat perfectly still, like a small statue, her eyes fixed on her lap. Enough. David's voice was quiet but firm. He turned to Lily and held out his hand. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you something proper to eat. Lily hesitated, looking uncertainly at Veronica. It's okay, David assured her. Come with Daddy. Slowly, Lily slid off her chair and took her father's hand. Her small fingers clutched his tightly. This is ridiculous, Veronica huffed. You're undermining my authority. I'm her mother now, David. You can't just… Stepmother, David corrected sharply. And we'll discuss this later. He led Lily to the kitchen, aware of how she pressed close to his side, almost hiding behind him. Veronica followed, her heels striking the floor like angry exclamation points. I insist we talk about this now, she said. You've been gone for days. You have no idea what's been happening here. Lily's behavior has been absolutely… Later, David cut her off again. His tone left no room for argument. The rest of the afternoon passed in a tense dance. David made Lily a proper sandwich, watching as she ate every bite. Veronica hovered nearby, alternating between defensive explanations and wounded silence. When evening came, she served an elaborate dinner, as if trying to erase the memory of the moldy bread with perfectly cooked roast and fresh vegetables. After dinner, when Lily had been tucked into bed and Veronica had retreated to their bedroom, David stood alone in the kitchen. Something had been nagging at him, a detail that didn't fit. He opened the pantry door. The shelves were stocked full. Fresh fruit sat in a wicker basket. New loaves of bread, still soft and fresh, were lined up neatly. Cans of soup, boxes of pasta, and bags of rice filled every shelf. In the center, on eye level, sat a loaf of artisan bread that still felt warm to the touch when David picked it up. He stood there, holding the fresh bread, staring at the abundance around him. The moldy bread hadn't been given to Lily because there was nothing else. It had been chosen, deliberately selected. His fingers tightened around the warm loaf as the realization sank in, heavy and horrible in his stomach. David stood in the doorway of Lily's bedroom, watching as she snuggled deeper under her pink comforter. Her nightlight cast star-shaped patterns across the ceiling, making the room feel softer, safer. He wished that gentle light could erase the haunted look he'd seen in her eyes at dinner. All cozy? He asked, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. Lily nodded, clutching her stuffed elephant closer. The toy was worn and gray, loved nearly to pieces, but she never slept without it. Would you like a story tonight? David reached for the stack of books on her bedside table. Lily shook her head, then grabbed his hand as he started to withdraw it. Her small fingers were cold against his skin. Daddy? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, sweetheart? She seemed to struggle with herself for a moment, her eyes darting to the partially open door. David leaned closer, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. It's okay, he said softly. You can tell me anything. Tears welled up in her eyes. The bread today. It wasn't. She swallowed hard. It wasn't the first time. David felt his heart skip a beat. He kept his voice calm, though inside something dark and angry stirred. What do you mean, honey? When you're gone… Lily's voice trembled. Veronica, she makes me eat bad things, or sometimes… A tear slid down her cheek. Sometimes she doesn't let me eat at all. David's free hand clenched into a fist against his knee, but he forced it to relax. How long has this been happening? Since after the wedding. Lily's words came faster now, as if a dam had broken. She's nice when you're here, but when you leave… More tears fell. She locks me in my room sometimes, says I'm worthless and stupid, and that you don't really want me around. David felt sick. The wedding had been 2 months ago. For weeks, his little girl had been suffering, and he hadn't noticed. He'd been too wrapped up in work, too willing to believe Veronica's explanations about adjustment periods and typical childhood behavior. She said… Lily hiccuped through her tears. She said if I told you, You wouldn't believe me. That you'd think I was lying to get attention. Oh, sweetheart. David gathered her into his arms, holding her close as she cried against his chest. I believe you. I believe every word. Really? Lily pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Really? He brushed her tears away with his thumb. And I promise you, things are going to change. No more bad food, no more locked doors, no more cruel words. Never again. But what if you have to go away again? Fresh fear clouded her face. Then I'll make sure you're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you, Lily. Not ever. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. You're the most important thing in my life. Do you know that? She shook her head slightly. Well, you are. And I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. His voice grew thick with emotion. But I see now, and I'm going to fix this. I promise. Lily's small hand touched his cheek. Don't cry, Daddy. He hadn't even realized there were tears in his eyes. He managed to smile for her. These are just daddy tears because I love you so much. She gave him a wobbly smile in return, the first he'd seen all day. Now, he said, helping her lie back down, would you like me to stay until you fall asleep? Lily nodded eagerly, and David stretched out beside her on top of the covers. She curled against his side, still clutching her elephant. He stroked her hair gently, humming an old lullaby his mother used to sing. It took nearly an hour for her breathing to even out into sleep. Even then, David stayed a few minutes longer, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her chest, memorizing the innocent curve of her cheek against the pillow. Finally, he eased himself off the bed and tucked the covers more securely around her. At the doorway, he paused for one last look, then quietly pulled the door closed. His study was dark when he entered it, lit only by the small desk lamp he'd left on earlier. He sank heavily into his leather chair, the weight of Lily's revelations pressing down on him like physical things. Cold meals, locked doors, cruel words. For weeks, while he'd been flying to business meetings, closing deals, building his empire, his daughter had been trapped in a nightmare. He'd handed her over to a monster and called it marriage. How could I have been so blind? The words escaped in a whisper, barely disturbing the silence of his study. The lamp cast yellow light across his desk, illuminating family photos he'd placed there proudly after the wedding. Veronica smiling beside him, one arm around Lily's shoulders. All three of them posed in front of their new house. Happy moments that now seemed like elaborate lies. He stared at Veronica's face in the photos, trying to reconcile the charming woman he'd married with the creature who would feed a child moldy bread, who would lock an 8-year-old in her room, who would whisper poison into innocent ears. His daughter's tears stained his shirt, still damp against his chest. The evidence of her pain was right there, had been right there all along. If only he'd looked closer, listened harder, come home more often. How could I have been so blind? He whispered again into the dim light. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, painting golden squares across the gleaming countertops. David stood at the stove, spatula in hand, watching as another pancake bubbled in the center. The sweet scent of vanilla and maple syrup filled the air. Lily sat at the kitchen island, her feet swinging slightly on the tall stool. She wore her favorite purple pajamas, the ones with tiny stars scattered across them. Her hair was still messy from sleep, but her eyes were fixed on David's every movement with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Almost ready, David said, flipping the pancake with a practiced motion. Would you like some strawberries with these? Lily nodded, then quickly added, Yes, please. David smiled, reaching for the fresh berries he'd washed earlier. He'd called his office first thing, canceling his meetings for the day. Some things were more important than business deals. Here we go. He slid a warm plate in front of Lily, 3 fluffy pancakes crowned with fresh strawberries and a light dusting of powdered sugar. Would you like syrup? Another nod, more enthusiastic this time. David drizzled maple syrup in a spiral pattern, just the way she used to like it when she was younger. When was the last time he'd made her breakfast? Before Veronica, surely. Before he'd gotten so caught up in work that morning, meals had become just another task to delegate. Lily picked up her fork carefully, as if afraid the plate might be yanked away. The first bite was tentative, but her eyes lit up at the taste. Good? David asked, already knowing the answer from her expression. Really good, she said softly, taking another bite with more confidence. David was just starting to make his own stack when heels clicked on the hardwood floor behind them. Veronica appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a crisp blue suit, her makeup perfect, and her dark hair smoothed into a sleek bun. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw them. David? I thought you'd be at the office by now. I'm taking the day off. He kept his voice neutral, continuing to pour batter onto the griddle. Would you like some pancakes? Veronica's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. No, thank you. I have a charity board meeting this morning. She glanced at Lily, who had hunched slightly over her plate. Lily, dear, isn't that rather a lot of sugar for breakfast? David set the batter bowl down with more force than necessary. It's fine. She's eating what I made her. Of course, Veronica said smoothly. I just worry about proper nutrition. You know how important that is for growing children. Like moldy bread? The words came out before David could stop them, sharp and cold. Silence fell in the kitchen. Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Veronica's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. I told you yesterday, that was a misunderstanding. Lily tends to exaggerate. No. David's voice was quiet, but firm. No more excuses. He moved around the island to stand beside Lily's stool, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She was trembling slightly under his touch. I know what's been happening, he continued, meeting Veronica's gaze steadily. I know about the locked doors, the missed meals, the cruel words. Color drained from Veronica's face, but she recovered quickly. David, surely you don't believe— I believe my daughter. The words rang with finality through the kitchen. Veronica's expression hardened. I see. Her eyes flicked between them, calculating. And what exactly do you plan to do about these accusations? David felt Lily tense under his hand. He knew what this moment meant. The choice between comfortable ignorance and difficult truth. Between his marriage and his daughter's well-being. Looking down at Lily's half-eaten pancakes, seeing the way she still curled protectively around her food, he realized it wasn't really a choice at all. What I plan to do, he said carefully, is protect my daughter, whatever that takes. Veronica's hands clenched at her sides. You're making a mistake, David. Things aren't as simple as— They're exactly that simple. He knelt beside Lily's stool, turning to face his daughter while keeping himself between her and Veronica. Lily, look at me, sweetheart. She met his eyes hesitantly. From now on, no one will ever make you eat what you don't deserve again. He squeezed her hand gently. I promise. A small smile trembled on Lily's lips, hope blooming in her eyes. In the doorway, Veronica stood rigid, her manicured nails digging into her palms. The mask of charm had slipped completely now, revealing something cold and angry beneath. She glared at them both, father and daughter united at the kitchen island, and David could see her realizing that her careful control was slipping away. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stalked away, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm down the hall. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. David turned back to Lily. How about we finish these pancakes? They're getting cold. Lily nodded, picking up her fork again. This time, when she took a bite, she didn't hunch over her plate. She sat a little straighter, her shoulders relaxing under the warm morning sun. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the kitchen as David rolled up his sleeves. Have you ever made bread from scratch before? Lily shook her head, watching curiously as he gathered ingredients from the pantry. Flour, yeast, salt, and sugar lined up neatly on the counter. "Well then, you're in for a treat," David winked, pulling a large mixing bowl from the cabinet. "This was your grandmother's recipe. She taught it to me when I was about your age." He measured warm water into the bowl, then sprinkled yeast over the surface. "Watch this. It's like magic. In a few minutes, the yeast will start to bubble and foam." Lily leaned forward on her tiptoes, eyes wide with interest. "Really? Really?" David smiled, remembering his own childhood amazement at the process. "While we wait, want to help me measure the flour?" Together, they scooped cups of flour into another bowl. Some of it missed, dusting the counter with white powder. David didn't mind. This wasn't about keeping things perfect. "Now the fun part," he said, once the yeast was ready. They mixed the ingredients, forming a shaggy dough. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" Lily nodded eagerly, rolling up her own sleeves. "Like this," David demonstrated, pressing his palms into the dough. "Push and fold. Push and fold. We're helping the bread get strong." Lily mimicked his movements, her small hands working beside his. A bit of dough stuck to her fingers, and she giggled. A bright, clear sound that David hadn't heard in weeks. His heart squeezed at the realization. "Dad?" Lily's voice was thoughtful as they kneaded. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." I wrote a story for class last week about a princess who lived in a tower." David listened, noting how she focused intently on the dough while speaking. "What happened to the princess?" "She was lonely. The tower keeper wouldn't let her have any friends." Lily's hands stilled. She just wanted someone to talk to. David's movements slowed too, understanding the parallel. "Did the princess ever get out of the tower?" "I didn't finish it yet." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "The teacher said it was too sad." David gently covered her flour-dusted hands with his own. "Maybe we could write a new ending together? One where the princess finds her voice and her happiness?" Lily's eyes met his, hopeful. "Could we?" "Absolutely." He squeezed her hands. "And Lily, you can always talk to me. About anything." They shaped the dough into a loaf and set it to rise. While they waited, Lily gradually opened up more. She told him about the art projects she'd hidden under her bed, afraid Veronica would throw them away. About the lunch periods spent alone because she wasn't allowed to invite friends over. About the nights she'd gone to bed hungry, trying to convince herself she deserved it. David listened, his heart breaking and mending with each revelation. He'd been so blind, so absent, but now he could be the father she needed. They slid the bread into the oven just as twilight painted the sky purple. The kitchen filled with a warm, yeasty aroma that made Lily's stomach rumble. "Almost ready," David assured her, setting plates on the table. He'd made a simple pasta to go with their bread and a small salad with cherry tomatoes that Lily had helped wash. Neither noticed the shadow that passed briefly across the kitchen window. Veronica, watching their domestic scene with narrowed eyes. When the bread emerged golden brown and crusty, Lily clapped with delight. David showed her how to tap the bottom to check if it was done, the hollow sound making her smile. "It's perfect," he declared, slicing still warm pieces for them both. Over dinner, Lily told him about her dreams, how she wanted to write stories, to draw, to maybe have a garden someday. "Could we plant flowers?" she asked hesitantly. "In the backyard?" "I think that's a wonderful idea." David watched her take another bite of bread, pride warming his chest. "We could start this weekend." After they'd cleared the dishes, Lily suddenly darted upstairs. She returned clutching a piece of paper to her chest. "I made this for you." She held it out shyly. David carefully unfolded the drawing. Two figures stood hand in hand under a bright yellow sun, one tall in a gray suit, one small in a purple dress. Both wore enormous smiles. Butterflies and flowers dotted the scene, and across the top in careful letters, "Me and Dad." "It's beautiful," David said softly, meaning it. He could see the hope in every crayon stroke, the love in every detail. "Thank you, sweetheart." Lily beamed, then threw her arms around his waist in a tight hug. David held her close, breathing in the scent of flowers still dusting her hair. Later, after helping Lily get ready for bed, David changed into his own pajamas. He removed his suit jacket carefully, withdrawing the drawing. With gentle fingers, he tucked it into his breast pocket, where it would stay close to his heart. Looking at those crayon smiles, he made a silent vow. Somehow, some way, he would make this picture real. He would give Lily the warm, loving home she'd drawn, filled with sunshine, laughter, and fresh-baked bread. Afternoon sunlight dappled the manicured front lawn as Veronica chatted with Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Bennett from next door. Her perfectly manicured nails gestured gracefully as she spoke, her voice carrying just the right note of concern. "It's been such a challenge," Veronica sighed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "You know how children can be at this age, especially when they're struggling." Mrs. Peterson nodded sympathetically, clutching her purse. "What do you mean, dear?" "Oh, just little things." Veronica's voice dropped conspiratorially. The dramatic outbursts, the attention-seeking. Yesterday, she refused to eat her lunch, claiming it wasn't good enough. David indulges her so much, it only makes things worse. "Poor thing," Mrs. Bennett murmured, though it wasn't clear whether she meant Lily or Veronica. "I try my best to provide structure, discipline." Veronica's lips trembled slightly. A masterful performance. But it's difficult when she fights against everything. The therapist says it's common in troubled children. There was no therapist, of course, but the neighbors didn't know that. They exchanged knowing looks, already mentally spreading the story through their social circles. Just last week, her teacher called about another incident. Veronica touched her throat delicately. "Such dark stories," she writes. "We're all quite concerned." Through the living room window, David caught snippets of the conversation. His jaw clenched as he watched Veronica work her manipulative magic, spinning lies into a web of sympathy for herself. That evening, after the neighbors had gone, tension crackled through the house like static before a storm. David sat in his study, reviewing documents but unable to focus. Veronica appeared in the doorway, her face arranged in an expression of wifely concern. "We need to talk about Lily," she said softly. David set down his papers. "Yes, we do. You're being too soft with her." Veronica perched on the edge of a leather chair. "All this special attention, cooking together, giving in to her whims. You're spoiling her." "Spoiling her?" David's voice remained level, but his fingers gripped the arms of his chair. "By showing basic kindness? By feeding her proper meals? She needs discipline, structure." Veronica leaned forward. "You're undermining everything I've tried to teach her about respect, about being grateful for what she has." "Grateful?" Now David did rise, his patience snapping. "For moldy bread? For being locked in her room? For being humiliated and starved? You see?" Veronica's voice rose sharply. "This is exactly what I mean. She's turned you against me with her stories and manipulation. She's not the innocent victim you think she is." "I know exactly what she is," David said quietly. "She's my daughter, and I know the truth now, Veronica. I've seen it with my own eyes." "The truth?" Veronica laughed, but there was an edge to it. "The truth is, you're blind to her manipulation. She's playing you, David, playing on your guilt for being an absent father." David stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Don't you dare try to twist this. I've seen the food you serve her. I've seen the fear in her eyes when you enter a room. No more." "So, that's it?" Veronica's mask slipped, revealing a flash of fury. "You'll throw away our marriage over a child's lies?" "Our marriage?" David gave a harsh laugh. What marriage? This facade you've created? The perfect wife act you put on for the neighbors while torturing my daughter behind closed doors? I've done nothing but try to raise her properly. Veronica's voice rose to a shout. Someone has to be the adult here, has to teach her discipline. Discipline? David's voice matched hers now. Is that what you call cruelty? Is that what you call abuse? The word hung in the air between them like a thunderclap. Upstairs, Lily lay in her bed, clutching her pillow tight against her chest. Their voices carried through the wall, muffled but clear enough to make out the angry words. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block it out. This is all your fault, she heard Veronica snap. You and your precious little girl. I should have known you'd choose her over me. There was never a choice to make. David's voice rumbled back. She's my daughter. I'll always choose her. Something crashed, probably one of Veronica's decorative vases. Lily flinched, burying her face deeper in her pillow. This was her fault. All her fault. If she hadn't told Dad about the bread, about the locked doors, about everything, maybe they wouldn't be fighting. You'll regret this. Veronica's voice hissed through the wall. Both of you will regret this. Lily hugged her pillow tighter, tears soaking into the fabric. The arguing continued, waves of angry words washing through the wall. She wanted to be brave, like the princesses in her stories, but right now she just felt small and scared. Would Veronica punish her tomorrow? Would Dad stay home again to protect her? What if he had to go back to work? What if? The questions swirled in her mind as she curled into a tight ball, trying to make herself as small as possible. Through the wall, she could still hear them fighting. About her. About the marriage. About truth and lies and everything in between. I'm sorry, she whispered into her pillow, though no one could hear her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as David walked hand in hand with Lily toward her elementary school. Her small fingers gripped his tightly, and he could feel a slight skip in her step that hadn't been there before. Look at my sparkly shoes, Daddy. Lily pointed down at her feet with her free hand. They shine in the sun. David smiled, watching her patent leather shoes twinkle with each step. They sure do, sweetheart. Just like your smile. As they approached the school gates, other children and parents turned to look. Lily usually walked alone or with Veronica, who always seemed too busy to linger. Today was different. Today, Lily's head was held high. Sarah, look, that's my dad, Lily called out to a friend, waving enthusiastically. The other little girl waved back, clearly impressed. David knelt down at the school entrance, straightening Lily's backpack straps. Have a wonderful day, sweetheart. Remember what I told you? Lily nodded solemnly. You love me no matter what, and I can tell you anything. That's right. He hugged her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. I'll be right here to pick you up after school. Instead of heading to his office, David drove to his friend Marcus's coffee shop. The morning rush had died down, leaving the cafe quiet except for the gentle hum of espresso machines. David? Marcus looked up from behind the counter, surprise evident on his face. Shouldn't you be at work? I need to talk, Marcus. David's voice was heavy. About Veronica. Marcus's expression darkened. He called to his assistant to watch the front and led David to a quiet corner booth. The leather seats creaked as they settled in, steam rising from their coffee cups. I wondered when you'd figure it out, Marcus said quietly. David's head snapped up. What do you mean? Marcus sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Remember Jennifer? My cousin who worked at Veronica's old company? David nodded slowly. She tried to warn me when you first started dating Veronica. Said there were incidents. The way Veronica treated her assistants' kids at company events. How she'd manipulate situations to make others look bad while making herself seem like the victim. Why didn't you tell me? David's voice cracked. Would you have believed me? Marcus asked gently. You were so happy, so convinced she was the answer to giving Lily a mother figure. And Veronica, she's good at what she does. Very good. David's coffee grew cold as Marcus shared more stories, whispered warnings that had circulated in their social circle, incidents that had been carefully covered up. Each revelation felt like another weight on David's shoulders. His phone buzzed, a text from his business partner. Heard about your situation. Veronica called, said you're having some problems. Need to talk. David showed Marcus the message, his hand shaking slightly. She's already starting her campaign, Marcus warned. She'll try to discredit you, make you look unstable. It's her pattern. I don't care about my reputation, David said firmly. I only care about protecting Lily. Throughout the day, more messages trickled in. Concerned calls from business associates, worried texts from acquaintances. Each one referenced Veronica's concerns about his mental state, his obsessive behavior, his paranoid accusations. By the time David picked Lily up from school, he could feel the weight of questioning eyes on him. Parents who had smiled warmly that morning now whispered behind their hands. Veronica's poison was spreading. But none of that mattered when Lily ran to him, her face lighting up at the sight of him waiting. Daddy, you came! Of course I did, sweetheart. I promised, didn't I? That evening, after a dinner of homemade spaghetti and meatballs, Lily's favorite, David tucked her into bed. Veronica was notably absent, having left a note about staying with friends, until David came to his senses. Daddy? Lily's voice was small in the dim light of her bedside lamp. Yes, sweetheart? She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small notebook, its cover decorated with unicorn stickers. I want you to have this. David took the notebook, opening it carefully. Inside, in Lily's careful 8-year-old handwriting, were dated entries. His heart clenched as he read, Today V made me eat moldy bread again. V locked me in my room for spilling milk. V said Daddy wouldn't believe me if I told. Lily sat up in bed, her stuffed giraffe clutched tight. I wrote everything down, in case no one believed me. David's vision blurred with tears as he pulled his daughter into a tight hug. His brave, clever girl had been documenting everything, creating a record of truth in her childish scrawl, while he had been blind to her suffering. I believe you, Lily, he whispered into her hair, his tears falling onto her pajama shoulder. I believe every word. David sat in his home office, morning light streaming through the tall windows. He'd been reviewing Lily's diary entries, making careful notes of dates and incidents, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Mr. Hanley, Law Office. His stomach tightened as he answered. David Remington speaking. David, we need to talk. Mr. Hanley's usually steady voice carried an edge of urgency. Veronica's lawyer just contacted me. She's preparing to file for divorce. And she's seeking full custody of Lily. The pen in David's hand clattered to his desk. What? She's building a case against you. Claims you're displaying erratic behavior, that you're becoming controlling and paranoid. Mr. Hanley paused. She's painting herself as the victim here, David? David's free hand clenched into a fist. She's the one who's been abusing my daughter. I know that. But we need concrete evidence. Your word against hers won't be enough, especially with the narrative she's creating. Through the window, David could see Lily in the garden, carefully watering her newly planted sunflower seeds. She looked so peaceful, so different from the frightened child who'd been forced to eat moldy bread just days ago. What do we do? David asked, his voice tight. Document everything. Keep Lily's diary safe. We'll need... Mr. Hanley was interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming. I have to go, David said quickly, ending the call as the click of high heels echoed through the house. Veronica burst into his office without knocking, her designer suit immaculate, her face a mask of calculated concern. "Well, I assume your lawyer has told you the news." David stood slowly, positioning himself between Veronica and the window where Lily could be seen. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what, David?" Veronica's laugh was cold. "Protecting myself from your increasingly unstable behavior? Trying to save our marriage from your paranoid accusations? You know exactly what you've done to Lily." "Oh, please." Veronica waved her hand dismissively. "That spoiled little girl has you wrapped around her finger. She's manipulating you, and you're too blind to see it." David's voice remained steady, though anger burned in his chest. "I've seen the truth, Veronica. The moldy bread, the locked doors, the cruel words. Who do you think people will believe?" Veronica stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the small space. The successful, caring stepmother who's been trying to provide structure and discipline? Or the workaholic father who suddenly starts making wild accusations after having a mental breakdown? "You won't get away with this, won't I?" Her smile was sharp. "I've already spoken to your business partners. They're very concerned about your state of mind, David. Your biggest client called me yesterday, wondering if you need to take a leave of absence." David felt the weight of her threats pressing in. Years of building his company, his reputation, all balanced against his daughter's safety. "And poor little Lily," Veronica continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "She needs a stable home environment, a mother's touch. The courts will see that. You will never have custody of my daughter. Watch me." Veronica's facade cracked, revealing the coldness beneath. "I will destroy you, David. Your reputation, your business, everything you've built. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation once a month." She turned on her heel, pausing at the door. "Oh, and David? You might want to check your company's financial records. Some interesting discrepancies have come to light. Anonymous tip, you understand." David's mind raced. She'd been planning this, laying groundwork, possibly even tampering with his company's books. The trap was closing in around him. "You have until tomorrow to reconsider your position," Veronica said. "Drop these ridiculous allegations, agree to my terms, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let you keep your precious reputation intact." The door closed behind her with a decisive click. David sank into his chair, head in his hands, the weight of her threats crushing down on him. Everything he'd worked for was at risk, but more importantly, Lily's safety hung in the balance. A small sob from the doorway made him look up. Lily stood there, tears streaming down her face, still clutching her little garden watering can. She must have come in through the patio doors and heard everything. "Daddy?" Her voice trembled. "Is she going to take me away?" David's heart shattered at the fear in her eyes. He pushed back from his desk, opening his arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily dropped her watering can and ran to him, climbing into his lap like she used to when she was smaller. She buried her face in his shirt, her small body shaking with sobs. "Don't let her take me, Daddy," she pleaded, fingers gripping his shirt. "Please don't let her take me away." David held her close, one hand stroking her hair, the other holding her securely against his chest. In that moment, any doubt about what he had to do vanished. His reputation, his business, none of it mattered compared to the trembling child in his arms. "Never," he whispered fiercely. "I will never let her take you." He pulled back slightly, wiping tears from Lily's cheeks with his thumb. "Do you hear me?" "Never," Lily hiccuped, her eyes searching his face. "Promise?" "I promise." David hugged her close again, his voice firm with conviction. "You and me, we're going to face this together. And we're going to win." The early morning sun had barely risen when David crept downstairs, a small bag tucked under his arm. He'd waited until both Veronica and Lily were sound asleep before beginning his task. His hands trembled slightly as he removed the first tiny camera from its packaging. The device was smaller than his thumbnail, a recommendation from his private investigator. Completely legal in your own home, the investigator had assured him. Just make sure they're in common areas only. David placed the first camera high in the kitchen corner, angled to capture the entire room, including the dining table, where he'd first discovered Lily with the moldy bread. The black lens blended perfectly with the crown molding's shadow. His footsteps echoed in the empty house as he moved methodically from room to room. A camera in the living room, tucked between family photos. Another in the hallway, hidden among the decorative wall sconces. Each one wireless, each one feeding directly to a secure server only he could access. As he worked, memories of Lily's fearful expressions flashed through his mind. How many times had she tried to tell him with her eyes what she couldn't say with words? How many silent pleas had he missed while rushing off to another business meeting? The last camera went into place just as the first sounds of movement came from upstairs. David quickly disposed of the packaging and settled into the kitchen, casually preparing coffee, as if it were any other morning. Veronica swept in first, perfectly coiffed, despite the early hour. "Going to the office today?" she asked, her tone sugary sweet. "You really should. People are starting to talk about your absence." "I have some work to do from home," David replied evenly, knowing the camera was capturing every word, every subtle threat wrapped in false concern. The next few days unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare through the camera feeds. David watched hours of footage each night after everyone had gone to bed, his laptop screen illuminating his devastated expression. There was Veronica, roughly grabbing Lily's arm when she thought they were alone, hissing threats about what would happen if she kept causing trouble. There was his daughter, sitting at the table with another cold meal while Veronica ate fresh-cooked food in the next room. Every cruel word, every moment of neglect, every calculated act of unkindness was captured in high-definition clarity. But David didn't stop with video evidence. He scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Carmichael, Lily's teacher, in a quiet coffee shop away from the school. "I've been concerned for months," Mrs. Carmichael admitted, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "Lily used to be such a bright, participative student. But lately," she pulled out a folder containing Lily's assignments, showing David how his daughter's usually neat handwriting had become shaky. Her story assignments filled with darker themes. "Would you be willing to put this in writing?" David asked. "Make an official statement?" Mrs. Carmichael's response was immediate. "Of course. I should have spoken up sooner." The neighbors were next. Mrs. Peterson from next door remembered hearing Lily crying through open windows. Mr. Jenkins, their elderly gardener, described seeing Veronica roughly pushing Lily inside one afternoon. Each account added another piece to the puzzle, another voice willing to speak the truth. Late one night, exactly 1 week after installing the cameras, David sat in his study reviewing the accumulated evidence. The footage played on his laptop, scene after scene of Veronica's true nature revealed. "You worthless little brat." Veronica's voice came through the speakers, crystal clear as she towered over Lily in the kitchen. "Your father only keeps you around out of obligation. If he knew what a burden you really are." David's hand shook as he paused the playback. Tears rolled down his cheeks, dropping onto his desk. The weight of his failure to protect Lily earlier pressed down on him like a physical thing. "This is enough," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. He touched the screen where Lily's frightened face was frozen in time. "This has to be enough." His eyes moved to the stack of written statements on his desk, to the external hard drive containing days of damning footage. Each piece of evidence felt like a key, unlocking the door to his daughter's freedom. The tears continued to fall as he faced the full scope of what Lily had endured, but now they were accompanied by something else: determination. The mahogany doors of courtroom 7B felt impossibly heavy as David pushed them open. Lily's small hand gripped his tightly, her palms slightly sweaty with nerves. The room was already half full, with morning sunlight streaming through tall windows and casting long shadows across the polished floor. "Remember what we talked about," David whispered, kneeling to Lily's eye level. "Just tell the truth. That's all you need to do." Lily nodded, her blue dress carefully pressed for the occasion. She clutched Mr. Whiskers, her beloved stuffed rabbit, closer to her chest. The judge had made a special allowance for the toy, understanding that an 8-year-old might need the comfort. They had barely settled into their seats when Veronica swept in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her navy suit was immaculate, her makeup perfect, and her smile confident as she conferred with her attorney, Maxwell Barrett, one of the city's most expensive divorce lawyers. David recognized the calculated performance in every gesture. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Matthews entered. The judge's stern expression surveyed the room as she took her seat, her eyes lingering briefly on Lily. "We're here today regarding the divorce and custody case of Remington versus Remington," Judge Matthews began, her voice clear and authoritative. "Mr. Barrett, you may present your client's case." Barrett rose smoothly, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Veronica Remington, has been a devoted stepmother to Lily for the past 2 years. However, Mr. Remington's recent erratic behavior and paranoid accusations have created an untenable situation." Veronica dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as her lawyer continued. "Mrs. Remington has evidence of Mr. Remington's controlling nature, his inability to maintain stable working hours, and his determination to alienate the child from her stepmother." David felt Lily's hand tighten in his as Veronica took the stand. Her performance was flawless, voice trembling at just the right moments, eyes wide with practiced concern. "I've tried so hard to love Lily as my own," Veronica testified, her voice thick with false emotion. "But David, he became obsessed with the idea that I was mistreating her. He installed cameras without my knowledge, kept her home from school, turned her against me." David's attorney, Sarah Chen, stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Remington, could you explain this entry from Lily's diary, dated 3 months ago?" Veronica's composed expression flickered as Sarah held up the small notebook with its flower-covered cover. "Children have active imaginations," she deflected. "Lily was clearly—" "I'll read it for the court," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Today, Veronica made me eat moldy bread again. My stomach hurts. I wish Daddy was home." Sarah looked up. "There are dozens of similar entries. Would you call this imagination, Mrs. Remington?" Color rose in Veronica's cheeks. "She's lying. She's always been a difficult child. Attention-seeking—" "Your Honor," Sarah cut in, "I'd like to present evidence item B." She nodded to a court officer who wheeled in a television screen. "This is footage from the kitchen security cameras Mr. Remington installed." The room fell silent as the video played. There was Veronica, her gentle public mask gone, towering over Lily at the kitchen table. "Ungrateful little brat," her recorded voice spat. "Your father only keeps you out of pity." More clips followed. Veronica throwing away Lily's dinner. Veronica locking Lily in her room. Veronica threatening worse punishments if Lily dared tell anyone. With each scene, Veronica's composure cracked further. Her lawyer kept objecting, but the evidence was overwhelming. Written statements from teachers, neighbors, and household staff painted a clear picture of systematic cruelty. Then came Lily's testimony. David's heart ached as his daughter approached the stand. Mr. Whiskers clutched tight against her chest. The judge smiled kindly, speaking in gentler tones than she'd used all morning. "Lily, can you tell me about living with your stepmother?" Judge Matthews asked. Lily's voice was small but steady. "She's nice when Daddy's home, but when he leaves—" She took a shaky breath. "She says mean things, makes me eat bad food, says nobody really wants me." That's a lie, Veronica burst out, half rising from her seat. She's manipulating everyone, just like she manipulates her father. Mrs. Remington, control yourself, Judge Matthews warned sharply. Continue, Lily. I wrote everything down, Lily said, her chin lifting slightly. Because I was scared nobody would believe me. But Daddy did. He believed me and made it stop. David blinked back tears as Lily answered questions about the diary entries, the video footage, the long months of enduring Veronica's cruelty alone. His daughter's courage filled the courtroom, her simple truth more powerful than any lawyer's argument. Judge Matthews listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking gentle, clarifying questions. When Lily finished, the judge removed her glasses and studied Veronica for a long moment. "I've seen enough," Judge Matthews declared, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "The evidence of Mrs. Remington's systematic emotional and psychological abuse is overwhelming." She lifted her gavel. "Full custody is awarded to David Remington. Mrs. Remington will have no visitation rights, and a restraining order will be issued immediately." The gavel cracked down with finality. Veronica leaped to her feet, her carefully constructed facade shattering completely. "This is ridiculous! You can't possibly—" "This hearing is adjourned," Judge Matthews cut her off firmly. Veronica snatched up her designer handbag, her face twisted with rage. All pretense of the caring stepmother vanished as she stormed toward the doors, her heels striking the floor like angry exclamation points. The heavy doors slammed behind her, leaving blessed silence in her wake. The afternoon sun painted warm patches on Lily's bedroom floor as David carried in another box of colorful decorations. The room already looked different. Gone were the stark white walls and formal curtains Veronica had insisted upon. Instead, soft lavender paint brightened the space, and flowing rainbow curtains danced in the spring breeze from the open window. "Where should we put your butterfly mobile, sweetheart?" David held up the delicate creation they'd bought that morning at the craft store. Crystal butterflies caught the light, sending tiny rainbows skittering across the walls. Lily looked up from where she sat, cross-legged on her bed, arranging her stuffed animals in a neat row. "Can we hang it right above my pillow, so I can watch them sparkle before I fall asleep?" "Perfect choice." David grabbed his toolbox and climbed the stepladder, carefully securing the hook in the ceiling. Lily watched intently, Mr. Whiskers clutched in her arms. The past few days had brought subtle but meaningful changes to her demeanor. Her shoulders weren't so tense anymore, and her smile came more easily. "There we go," David said, stepping back to admire the gently spinning butterflies. "What do you think?" Lily's face lit up. "It's beautiful, Daddy." She bounced off the bed and hugged his waist. "Can we put up my drawings next?" "Absolutely." David retrieved the stack of artwork they'd carefully preserved. Each picture told a story, some from happier times before Veronica, others darker and more hesitant from the difficult months. But the newest ones burst with color and joy, like flowers finally blooming after a long winter. Together, they created a gallery wall, taping up each drawing with care and consideration. Lily explained the story behind each one, her voice growing more animated with each tale. David listened intently, his heart swelling at her enthusiasm. "And this one," Lily said, holding up a picture of a garden, "is where we're going to plant our flowers, right?" "That's right." David smiled, remembering their morning trip to the garden center. "Those seeds we bought should start sprouting in a couple of weeks." As they worked, the room transformed. Stuffed animals found homes on freshly fluffed pillows, books were arranged by color on white shelves, and twinkling fairy lights created a soft glow around the windows. It wasn't just a bedroom anymore, it was a sanctuary, a space where Lily could feel completely safe and loved. "Time for our cooking lesson," David announced as they put away the last of the decorating supplies. Lily's eyes brightened. Their new routine of preparing meals together had quickly become her favorite part of the day. In the kitchen, David pulled out the ingredients for homemade pizza, while Lily climbed onto her special step stool. He showed her how to measure flour, explaining fractions as they worked. Math was more fun, she'd declared, when it involved food. "Remember what comes next?" David asked, handing her the measuring cup. "Salt and yeast." Lily carefully added each ingredient, her tongue poking out in concentration. "And warm water, but not too hot, or the yeast won't be happy." "That's my girl." David helped her mix the dough, guiding her hands as they kneaded it together. Flour dusted their clothes and noses, but neither minded. These messy moments were precious. They were building something far more important than just dinner. While the dough rose, they sat at the kitchen table with cold glasses of lemonade. Lily's legs swung freely as she told David about the book she'd been reading, her hands gesturing animatedly as she described the adventures of a brave young princess. "Maybe we could read the next chapter together before bed?" David suggested. Lily nodded eagerly. "And prayers too? I like saying prayers with you." "Always," David promised, touched by her request. Their evening routine had become sacred. Stories, prayers, and quiet talks about their days. It was everything he'd missed while buried in work. Everything he'd almost lost to Veronica's cruelty. As the pizza baked, filling the kitchen with mouth-watering aromas, Lily retrieved her latest artwork from her backpack. "I made this in art class today," she said, somewhat shyly. It showed two figures holding hands beneath a brilliant yellow sun, their smiles wide and genuine. "It's wonderful," David said softly. "Should we put it on the fridge?" "Next to my old one," Lily decided, pulling a magnet from the drawer. She carefully positioned the new drawing beside the earlier picture she'd given him weeks ago, the one he'd carried in his suit pocket during the custody battle. Standing side by side, the two drawings told their story. The first showed uncertainty in its hesitant lines and muted colors, while the new one radiated confidence and joy. The sun was bigger, brighter, and the figures stood straighter, their joined hands clearly drawn. David watched as Lily stepped back to admire her work, her face glowing with quiet pride. The kitchen timer chimed, and together they pulled out their perfectly baked pizza, its cheese bubbling and golden. As they settled at the table, David offered thanks, not just for the food, but for second chances, for his daughter's resilient spirit, and for the gift of finally being the father she deserved. Lily's hand found his across the table, squeezing gently as she added her own quiet "Amen." The evening light streamed through the windows, catching the two drawings on the refrigerator. Old and new, side by side, they marked the beginning of their fresh start, two hearts healing, growing stronger together with each passing day. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents filed in, finding their seats among the rows of metal folding chairs. David sat in the front row, program clutched in his hands, his heart racing with anticipation. The stage before him was decorated with hand-painted scenery, cardboard trees, and a castle made from refrigerator boxes, all lovingly created by the third-grade class. Through a gap in the heavy red curtain, he caught glimpses of children in costume rushing back and forth. His eyes searched for Lily, and for a moment, he saw her peek out. She scanned the crowd anxiously, her small hands gripping the curtain. When her gaze found him, her whole body relaxed. David gave her a gentle wave and a thumbs up, and her answering smile lit up her entire face. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. The principal stepped onto the stage to introduce the play, a creative adaptation of Sleeping Beauty that the children had helped write themselves. David's chest swelled with pride as he remembered Lily practicing her lines at home, her confidence growing with each rehearsal. The curtain rose, and there she was, center stage, in her princess costume. The sparkly blue dress they'd picked out together caught the stage lights, making her shine. Gone was the timid girl who used to shrink from attention. In her place stood a young actress ready to tell her story. Lily's voice rang out clear and strong as she delivered her first lines. David watched in amazement as she moved across the stage with grace, responding to her fellow actors with natural ease. When she sang her solo, a song about dreams coming true, her eyes found his again, and the love between father and daughter filled the entire auditorium. During the intermission, David overheard the parents sitting behind him. "Lily Remington has changed so much," one whispered. "Remember how quiet she used to be?" "It's wonderful to see her blooming," another replied. "Her father's done an amazing job since—" "Well, you know," David smiled to himself, touched by their words, but knowing the credit belonged to Lily's own courage. She had faced her fears, trusted him when trust seemed impossible, and found her voice again. The second act began, and Lily's performance only grew stronger. In the final scene, where her character awakened to find true love wasn't what she expected, it was the love of family that mattered most, David felt tears welling up in his eyes. The parallels to their own journey weren't lost on him. As the cast took their bows, Lily stood in the center, her eyes locked directly on David, her smile radiant and free. He rose to his feet, clapping until his hands hurt, not bothering to wipe away the tears that rolled down his cheeks. Other parents joined him in the standing ovation, but he barely noticed them. All he could see was his daughter, taking an extra bow, her face glowing with joy. When the curtain closed for the last time, David waited in the lobby with the other parents. He held a small bouquet of yellow daisies, Lily's favorite flowers. The cast began emerging from the backstage door, still in costume, running to their waiting families. Then Lily appeared, still wearing her princess crown slightly askew. She spotted him and raced across the lobby, launching herself into his arms. David lifted her up, spinning her around as she giggled. "You were amazing, sweetheart," he whispered, holding her close. Lily pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her small hands framing his face. "I'm happy now, Daddy," she said softly. David's heart felt so full it might burst. "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." I hope you enjoyed that story. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you do not miss out on tomorrow's story. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy.